when I gave up the Late Show particularly, I thought maybe it's time to change. But I still wasn't moving, Kate. That's the point. I was still, well, I've got the radio show and, we'll see what happens. And then the cosmic nudge,
and
if
then
you
it
want to
happened
call
for
it.
you.
Yeah, Sinead O'Connor, she called me 2 weeks before she died and we were friends. And she said, how are you? And I said, I'm okay. I'm so. And she said, you've been mugged by God in a hoodie. And I said, I don't really know what that means. And she said, well, you've been kind of stabbed and punched and kicked around the place by what you think is a bad guy in a hoodie. And then he walks away and he puts the hood down and it's God saying you're welcome.
Okay, let's speak to Virgin Radio's new king of mid-mornings, Ryan Tubridy. It's such a pleasure to have you on Times Radio. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you for asking.
I've got to ask, how's it going? You're just over a month old now, aren't you?
Yes.
Everything okay?
Like a newborn child. I thought I was 20 years in Irish media. I was a little nervous coming over. Even though I'm a man of 50 years old, it doesn't make you an adult, does it? I mean, it's just because you've grown old doesn't make you an older or wiser person. So I had the almost juvenile sense of worry about homesickness, new job, new city, like a new kid in a new school.
Well, you're a home bird, aren't you, traditionally?
That's right. My father always said that I'd get homesick 2 train stations away from my house. And that was said not in a cruel sort of paternal, cruel dad thing. We got on great.
Beat it out of him.
Yeah, that's right. But my family would mock because they all lived here. My siblings lived in London for a long time. And I used to come over for visits, but never to stay. So I was nervous as hell, be honest with you. And I came over and it was like being a student again, almost. I had to rent a flat. I had to buy all the stuff for it. I became very acquainted with Argos and catalogues and John Lewis, places I only saw ads for Christmas on TV, but I never realised that what they sold. I had to get cutlery and dishes and bed linen and washing up liquid. It was bonkers. It was like being 21, and it was all very new. And the trepidation and the fear that comes with potential nervousness and a new beginning was dissipated ultimately by pure enjoyment of the experience. I was embracing the kind of pseudo student beginnings, and I found myself going, this is quite nice. I picked a nice place to live, which is on the tube line that I get to work every day. So that took a lot of pain out of it. Mm-hmm. I found a nice little neighbourhood that reminded me a bit of my own at home. That was really
connected to the Beatles. We won't say where, but you just happened upon this wonderful place.
That's right.
Planets aligned.
So I was traipsing through the likes of Putney and Clapham and different places I've heard about and only read about, but I didn't have any idea where they were. I actually bought a map of London. I mean, it was like Forrest Gump. It was
a physical map.
I was an ingenue. I was wondering, what is this city? I knew it, I read it, but I didn't live in it. So I was walking around, but in my hand I was also reading J.K. Rowling's writes as Robert Galbraith, and she writes the Strike series, I'm sure you know.
Cormoran Strike, yeah.
Precisely, having one. And I was reading that. And one of the chapters, Cormoran Strike, goes to a tube station and there's a Beatles coffee shop within the tube station. And as we were walking along, I said, can we just stop looking? I just want to go into this tube station in St. John's Wood to buy a cup of coffee just to get Beatley for 10 minutes because I'm a Beatles nut. Got the coffee and I went, wait a minute. And I looked around and said, this is a nice neighbourhood. And I went for a little walk around and within, I'd say about a week, I had a flat there.
Wow. Yeah. Meant to be.
J.K. Rowling's fault. We blame her for so many things these days, don't we?
Yes,
so
yes,
you can blame her for that too.
You can hunt her down for that as well.
Yeah, put her down for that too. God damn her. However, I've settled in now many weeks later and I'm loving it. Absolutely. I'm loving it more than I really thought I would. I was thought maybe I'll do a weekend.
Because it's a brave move, isn't it? I was thinking about this, about, a 50-year-old guy, incredibly successful in a different country, really well known, huge career, and then you up sticks and leave it all behind and come to a city. And actually starting afresh is quite a thing when you're a 50-year-old guy, right? I don't want to, pretend it's nothing because it is.
We'll call it
is
for
a
what
real
it is.
life move, right?
That's right. It's a shock to the system, and it took a little bit of. It took a bit of guts, he says, lacking any humility, but it did, I suppose, in some ways. But I was ready for a big change, and London was the only game in town in some ways. And again, that came down, even getting this job in Virgin wasn't meant to be. I mean, I'm not being all mystic and cosmic about it, but it is strange how it all works out. I came over for meetings with different broadcasting organisations. Chris Evans, who I'd met before, some years previously, filling in for him on occasion when he worked on BBC Two, had said, come in and have a cup of coffee. I came in for a cup of coffee. As we were driving in the taxi by the river, I said to the taxi driver, could you put on Virgin Radio, what have you. And Chris Evans comes on and he goes, coming up on the show today, acting god, Damian Lewis. And I got all excited. I love Damian Lewis. He's great in Band of Brothers. I look forward to meeting him. And he said, and also from Ireland, Ryan Tubridy. I went, what? And before I knew it, I was in studio talking to him live on air. I hadn't been on radio for quite a while. And I felt great. I was like, this is what I love doing, talking, as you can probably gather now. And then somebody tapped me on the shoulder, said, could you come and meet one of the bosses? They'd like to say hello. And they said, we'd like to work with you. And I said, well, you weren't on the agenda. I'm going to another meeting after this. This was just meant to be a cup of coffee. And within weeks, I had a contract and I started working here. So it's all worked in very peculiar ways, but it's worked out for the best,
You say it wasn't meant to be. Obviously, you left RTE after 2 decades there. You'd presented The Late Late Show, The Chat Show.
That was the great one.
I mean, amazing, well-known. You attracted huge audiences, huge stars to that show. That is the show. And you spent 14 years presenting it. Tell me about leaving RTE. Tell me about the decision around that.
So I left the Late Late Show in May of this, just before summer 2023, because I'd had enough of that. In the sense that I loved it. I had a couple of years after the contract, but I said I was running out of road on it for myself. And I said,
running out of road, how? Like energy levels or passion for it?
Passion, all those things. I don't want to bore you to that, but during the COVID, the pandemic, we still did the show. And it's fully live.
Without an audience, right?
And no audience, precisely. And you're going out for 2 hours once a week on a Friday night between 9:30 to 11:30, sometimes 12, where normally 200 people are cheering, and there was just nothing. And you're going out and you're saying, okay, folks, and the show became this sort of strange town hall, and you were like this weird mayor, and you come out and say, right, this is really bad for the country. It's really sad what's happening. And you were near like a cheerleader, and you were saying, so here's what PPE looks like, and here's what a COVID test looks like. And you're trying to take a bit of the fear. And then you'd interview guests, and then you made money it became a charity fundraising situation. And we kept going, but it was exhausting. I didn't realize that at the time because
you were getting nothing back from the audience either.
But that was fine. But we were all working together to keep the thing afloat. And then COVID left, and I went back, but there was something lacking, and I said, you know what, I'm done here. I can tell I was just the right side, but 2 days before my 50th birthday, so I just felt I won't ever present the show in my 50s. This works out fine, and that was great. And then I was staying on the radio show, and then events, Dear Boy events took over, which we're not going to get into. It's for another day, but it meant that by the time I got to the autumn, I was ready for a change and for a different direction. And I had worked here briefly about 10 years ago, filling in for Graham Norton and Chris Evans and Ken Bruce and Terry Wogan in different ways. And I nearly came over, but I decided against it. My 2 daughters were very young at that time, and I said no. And now they're now 19 and 25, and it worked out.
Yeah,
the timing couldn't have been better.
Do you think everything happens for a reason? Because I know that you talked briefly about this period. You were, dragged into a scandal which was of RTE's making, really. They're a public broadcaster. They didn't properly publish how much they were paying some of their biggest stars, yourself included. And they were hammered for that because, of course, they need to be reporting that sort of stuff, correctly because they're a public broadcaster. I know you've apologised, saying that you should have maybe thought about calling it out when you realised that they were publishing figures that weren't matching what you were taking home.
Well documented,
All that's well documented, but still you're kind of dragged into this scandal, basically.
Yes.
Looking back at that period now, everything happens for a reason. Did that also contribute largely to you wanting to make a clean break because you needed to?
Yeah, that's a fair point.
You needed to switch it up.
Yeah, no, that's a very fair point. And it did. Of course it did. It meant re-examining my options, in the sense that for years I always thought about coming to the UK to try something. And I didn't have the courage of my convictions to do it. I was kind of coasting. I was fine. I got this situation. It's
really, really successful.
Well,
you were enjoying success.
I was enjoying, and I also enjoyed the people I worked with, and I enjoyed it all. When I gave up the Late Late Show, particularly, I thought maybe it's time to change. But I still wasn't moving, Kate. That's the point. I was still, I've got the radio show, and we'll see what happens. And then the cosmic nudge,
and
if
then
you
it
want to
happened
call
for
it.
you.
Yeah, Sinead O'Connor, she called me 2 weeks before she died, and we were friends, and she said, how are you? And I said, I'm okay, I'm so. And she said, you've been mugged by God in a hoodie. And I said, I don't really know what that means. And she said, well, you've been kind of stabbed and punched and kicked around the place, by what you think is a bad guy in a hoodie, and then he walks away and he puts the hood down, and it's God saying you're welcome. In other words, a stranger in disguise, a blessing in disguise, and you go, oh sugar, like that's a really nice way of putting it. It's also a great autobiography title, God in a hoodie. It sums up a lot of what happened, because you just went, yeah, I was mugged, and now I realised that for possibly good reason, because I wouldn't be here doing something extraordinary. By extraordinary, I mean doing something that I love. It's an extraordinary development in my life, is what I'm trying to say. And I think, would you say it's the best thing that ever happened? That's probably a bit glib. Would anyone want to a horrible thing happen to them
because
in their lives?
Because it still hurts. You as kind of probably the most high profile name there, of course people were going to latch on. Those percentage of people who will latch on to the biggest name involved in a scandal, even if it's inadvertently, even if you apologise for whatever your part was, they are just going to latch on to you, because that is the nature of how fame and celebrity works, right?
That's it, and I'm not a spring chicken in this regard, so I just motor on to the future and to a very positive place, and that's what brings me here.
Any regrets about the whole situation?
No, I think that it's one of those situations that I think the fullness of time will probably settle matters more than most things.
Can we talk about politics?
Yeah, sure.
I'm itching to talk to you about politics, because you have, I didn't realise this until I started, doing my reading up on you, Ryan.
Yes.
As we do.
Don't believe, beware the research online with people. He says
I take it all with a pinch of salt.
Yeah, good.
I take it all with a pinch of salt.
Because I'm here now, so you can ask me yourself.
I can just ask you myself. Your family's history in politics, just explain this, because this is a thing, right? You've got going back generations.
Yeah, so I begin, if you want, with my granddad on my mum's side. Todd Andrews was one of the founders of the Irish state, the Republic of Ireland. He was a friend of Eamon de Valera's, who was a critical figure at the beginning of the Irish, the birth of the nation, if you like. And he was his kind of go-to guy to set things up. Bord na Móna, the energy company, and CAE, the transport company, and all these different organisations that would have been semi-state, if you like. He asked my grandfather to do that on that side. On the other side, my father's father, Sean Tubridy, out in the west of Ireland, was a GP, but also he was a fighter in the Civil War. So yes, very much part of that story. Then go to my uncle's generation. David Andrews became an MP, as you say, TD in home, and the Minister for Foreign Affairs, which is Secretary of State for, what's the foreign...
Secretary of State.
Yeah, Secretary of State, sorry. Precisely, in Ireland. So he was a signatory to the Good Friday Agreement, something we're very proud of, and his brother was an MEP, Neil. And now their sons, my cousins, are an MEP and a TD, respectively, Barry and Christopher, and so the story continues. So
all with Fianna Fáil?
All Fianna Fáil, yeah. It's all sweeping down the line.
What are your family discussions like then? Do you talk about politics
all the time
as a family all the time?
Yeah, we're a very political family in that sense, but we're not blindly loyal to any particular party. Also, once you get into media, all politics gets left at the gate, as you well know. But that doesn't mean you're not allowed to talk about politics. I feast on it. I mean, I love it. I love British politics, French politics, Spanish, German. I'm fascinated by politics the way somebody wears a jersey to go and watch a match at the weekend. I mean, that's my thing. Do
you think the way that politics works in the Republic of Ireland right now, we've had that sort of head of government sharing between Leo Varadkar and
Micheál Martin.
Yeah. Is that working, do you think?
Yeah.
And we'll talk about Northern Ireland as well, because that is an important part of the equation, of course. Do you think the political system works as it is at the moment?
I would say yes, because I think that some years ago, maybe 20 years ago, there was talk of what they call the rotating Taoiseach. So you can imagine if the balance of power was different in the House of Commons, that you would say you're Prime Minister for 2 years, you're Prime Minister for 2 years, and we're all friends. It sounds preposterous, but actually it's worked in the Irish context between Leo Varadkar and Micheál Martin. There was a very smooth transition of power between the two men, and when the time came and we were kind of nervously going, is this going to work? You assume when you see the American presidency, that transfer of power, you think it's seamless, it always has been, always will be. And then you get to Trump and you realise don't.
It's not always like that.
Beware the arrogance of assumption in politics and beyond. So with that in mind, it seems to have worked out fine. Now that's not to say you have people listening to your show, and they'll be saying, "Wait a second, because like politics, everyone has an opinion, and will Sinn Féin sweep to power next time around?"
Well, let's talk about this because they probably had historically their best ever result, didn't they? The 2020
massive
Irish elections.
Their problem for them was they didn't run enough candidates.
Well, okay, and so we'll look at Northern Ireland, of course. First Minister Michelle O'Neill, first Republican minister, the influence of Sinn Féin in Northern Ireland, and on her first day in office, Michelle O'Neill says, within 10 years, I want to hold a referendum on a united Ireland. What do you reckon to that?
Yeah, I think that Mary Lou McDonald, of course, is the Sinn Féin leader and president, and I think she definitely had something to say about that. And I would take a step back and say Michelle O'Neill's opening comments in Stormont when she got the job of First Minister, I thought it was very dignified, and I thought it was very healing, and I thought it was pretty impressive. And I thought, okay, that's good. So she didn't kind of start coming in and waving the green flag. I thought it was quite delicately handled. Anyone who's surprised by Sinn Féin talking about an All-Ireland referendum must look at the broader picture. Their name is Sinn Féin. Look at their politics, look at their history. It's not going to be a big shock. Was it insensitive so soon after the generous sense of ceremony the first couple of days? Yeah, I think they're going to hold your wish, as we say, for a little while. So, but I think it's going to work out. I think I was weirdly emotional about the return to power and the two women at the top in the top jobs. Yeah, I think I was a kid in the 80s and into the 90s. I'd listen to the news every day, and it was so depressing. One day, Protestant shot dead in a taxi. Next day, Catholic shot dead in a taxi. And it was just relentless death and destruction. And then that we watch the news and you hear that, and you just see then the smoke. And you just see all these gorgeous families wandering around, then your Oma, and you just go, when is this thing going to end? And it wasn't on my doorstep by any means. But you're Irish, you feel it. And it's an empathy thing, isn't it? And so when the Stormont fell 2 years ago, you go, please don't let this disintegrate. Suspend, yes, but not disappear. And when it came back, I was kind of, oh, thank God, the car's moving again, and they got two good drivers and a co-driver, and I thought, yeah, this is good. These seem like smart people running the show here. I think we could be okay.
US politics.
Yeah. How can you not be interested in US politics? It's so much fun. I mean, if British politics and Irish politics are, in black and white, US politics are like cartoons. But if only it wasn't so serious, that's the problem.
Well, it's getting very serious.
It's getting very serious. Well, I mean, I do believe Donald Trump will be elected for a second term. I mean,
and that is where the polls are going at the moment. So you're entirely right.
Well, I mean, it's not a shock, prediction. No. Let's face it. I appreciate that, but at the same time, he is quite a shocking figure. If
you isolate that and you look at the journey American politics has been on for the past 2 years, of course it's a shock when you if you don't look at any of the build-up, if you're ignoring some of the voices who are speaking in defense of Donald Trump and why they're harnessing onto Donald Trump, if you kind of mute those a little bit, of course it seems extraordinary. But sort of here we are. I think, what do you make of it? I mean, what are your thoughts about going into November 2024? The prospect of Donald Trump in power again.
This isn't a moment to try and impress or anything, but I'm sure you've met or interviewed Hillary Clinton, and when she wrote that book, What Happened? No question mark. I remember meeting her for the first time in Chappaqua in upstate New York, and I didn't know anything about her, and other than followed her, but I didn't know what to expect. Is what I'm trying to say. I'd only seen her on television and in the internet or whatever. And we got talking, and she was funny, and she was engaging, and she was warm. Didn't see that coming. She was smart, expected that. But she was none of the things I saw on TV. And I walked away from the interview, it was half an hour, and I thought, that is so depressing. And you say, what's depressing? I said, because the Democrats ran the wrong version of this person. They ran a candidate they thought we wanted to see. Whereas if they ran the version of the person who I met that day, a grandmother, a mum, just a lovely person, full of smarts and fun, she would have she would have won, and the world would have been better. And I felt like a
Do you not
child.
think that would have shone through at some point though? Because you're basically saying it's sort of personality politics, right?
Oh God, so grim. Anyway, I just felt very despondent after that. So anyway, back to your original question. Here we go. 2024, big campaign. You know, it's even looking at Nikki Haley flailing around at this stage, and they're just waiting for her to say, "Okay, I get it, I'm gone." The inevitability of it all is striking. It breaks my heart to see Joe Biden aging so quickly. Is that an ageist thing to say? It might be, but it's not meant to be.
I think it's a fact, really.
It's a matter of fact.
Isn't it?
I mean,
it's really hard to escape from that.
Isn't it? And he seems like a nice fella, and I know he loves America, and he seems like he's largely doing the right thing, I think. And it's just you're looking at him sometimes, you're going, he's like a very old. You see people his age who aren't that old, you know, and you just think, God, what is going to happen? Well, we're going to head into this thing, and barring the November surprise and barring some health catastrophe or an assassination, let's say it, or something, it'll be the two heads and Donald for the win. Yeah.
Well, look, I think we have to get used to that. America's got to work with it. America's telling us that that's what it wants at the moment, and who are we to say we know any better?
Well, it's a fair point. And, you know, I found when I was getting older, into my 40s and beyond, I suddenly realised that the people running the countries and the worlds, the different parts of the world, were all my age. And I thought, Jesus, I know nothing. What do they know? And because you always felt, when I was growing up, I always thought the adults know stuff. It's going to be okay. Then you're the adult, you realise, oh God, they're important now. And that's a frightening thought, because I was in school with some of these people.
We'll leave it there. Thanks so much. We'll leave our listeners to ponder on that one. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your time.
Ryan Tubridy. You can find Ryan mid-mornings on Virgin Radio, 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. throughout the week. It's been a great pleasure. Thanks.
Likewise. Thanks for your time.